Hey, it's Jeff Sauer here, and in this preview of the Jumpstart podcast, I'm going to share with you some insights about starting a podcast. So you want to start a podcast, or maybe you're interested in learning about how the whole podcasting thing works. Well, I was curious about it a couple years ago, and it took me about 2 years to really figure out what I wanted to do and the angle I wanted to take for the podcast, and then I went for it. I created the Jumpstart podcast. I think I started talking about doing a podcast maybe in 2012, 2013, and in 2015 is when I finally released it. So I took 2 years to figure it out, and then I took another 3+ years of doing the podcast to really understand what I liked doing about it, what I didn't like, and where I'd take things in the future. And so I figured this would be a fun episode to share with you some ideas as to if you want to start your own podcast, how you might be able to be successful with it, what you might look forward to doing, and just how it all might come together. And so this is really just my reflection of creating a podcast and talking about some angles that I would take differently if I could do it again, or just some things, some directions that I might take the podcast in the future. So this is going to be an interesting one because it's my podcast talking about how I might do other things in the podcast, and even just sharing with you some knowledge about what you should look at and how things should go. And so we'll see where this goes. I think it's going to be a fun one, and it's not for everybody. Not everybody really cares about making their own podcast, but I would say that as the number of people who subscribe to podcasts in the world is increasing exponentially, it's more and more of a conversation we should be having. You can't really ignore podcasts anymore because they're everywhere. More than 30% of people who have a smartphone download a podcast or listen to them on a regular basis. And so those numbers can't be denied, and you should check it out and understand where you can play in it. Now, like I said, you might be somebody who never wants to create a podcast. You might just be a listener. You might not even listen to podcasts. Well, you can still learn something in this, right? It's always worthwhile to learn from both the things that we do and then maybe the things that we don't do. So at least you know now what I didn't know when I started. And that is cool because knowledge is power. So check it out. Hopefully you enjoy this episode of the Jumpstart podcast.